All right. Oh my goodness, that took a bit. Sorry, it was like everything went wrong this morning. It was ridiculous. Um, so let's just dive into it. If anyone's here, we're just gonna kind of start getting stuff done. So today we're gonna talk about how to digitize line art and ink drawings. So this is just gonna be a really quick tutorial. Kind of follow along. One of the things that was really inspiring me the other day was this awesome photo. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. That was um, this poster that I worked up on this week, which turned out great. And so this ink drawing right here actually is one that I drew for Inktober. And so the idea is that I digitized this, brought it in, and then I was able to duplicate it down here, which is pretty awesome. Change the scale, change the rotation, and then just did a bunch of different effects. We'll go into this poster next week and how to actually create it. It turned out really cool. And yeah, there's a lot you can learn from Photoshop just by doing this one project. You have a lot of tools, a lot of layers. Shows you how all these different adjustment layers work to get this to where it is right here. So let's focus on that today. So we're going to start here. So let's dive in. The first thing we need to do, I'm actually just going to pull a screenshot from my Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, go ahead and head over there. It's Nate K underscore UX. Um, but we'll come in here. Let's go ahead and grab this same image. And then I'm just going to screenshot it. And so you can do this however you want. I'm just doing this because it's quick and easy. But if you wanted to, you could scan it. You could use a PDF scan app. What I find is just getting some kind of an image into Photoshop is all you really need, as long as it's pretty high resolution. Which this one, it's pretty good. It's not like the greatest, but it'll get the work done and it'll look awesome. So this will be a good way to use for you to kind of see too, like how Photoshop's able to really look in with its AI from what do they call it now? Adobe Sensei, and see how it reads photo data. In particular, the bitmap that's coming in and how detailed it is. So let's go ahead and fire up Photoshop. Dun, 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 dun. All right. And the idea behind this poster project is I just want you to be able to print it off at home. So we're just going to do an 8.5 by 11. So we're just going to go new file. We're going to go 8.5 by 11. So it's really important that you have your document set up correctly, especially with this resolution. Because if we're doing any kind of print media, you always want stuff at 300 dpi. And DPI stands for dots per inch. It's also referred to as PPI. Obviously, PPI is pixels per inch. I remember when I first started, I was all confused because teachers are throwing out DPI versus PPI. It just depends on who you talk to, but just know that DPI also means like dots per inch. In this case, pixels are dots. So we're going to keep it in the digital space and keep it RGB color. I know this is a print project, but it's also kind of a digital publishing project. So we're going to keep it there. 8-bit's good enough. I usually don't go anything over 8-bit unless we're doing like a really fine art. If you're doing fine art, you can drop it up to 16. I wouldn't do 32 unless you really know what you're doing. I mean, you're doing a print shop. In terms of color profiles, keep them default. Obviously, pixel aspect ratio, keep it default as well. So we're going to click create, and boom, we're here. So first thing we're going to do is save our file. So we're going to go Control Shift S. We're going to save it. Let's see if we can get that here. Wherever it went. World, what's going on here? Give me one sec to close out and come back in real quick. For some reason my save window's off with the screen thing. I gotta say, this streaming thing is a lot harder than you think it is. So bear with me. It's the first time doing this, but I gotta say, I have a newfound respect for streamers. That is for sure. So let's do this again. New file. I already have it saved, so we're just gonna click create. Save the spiel. So we're gonna go file, save as, and just to avoid that this time, we're gonna come in and just save it to the cloud. So um, we're gonna make a new folder. We're gonna call this posters, and we're gonna click up here. We're gonna name it Floral Part 1. Click save. All right, so you can see it's saved up here, and you've got what's great with the cloud document is that Adobe will save it for you. So I have a really fast trigger finger with Control S. It's just built into my muscle memory at this point. But it is nice to have Adobe come in and just kind of save it almost like a Google Doc where it's always continuously saving. So let's go ahead and dive in. I have that screenshot saved to my clipboard, so I'm just going to click Control V, and then I'm going to go Control T, and that's going to bring up the transform. And remember back, they changed this, so when you pull it up, you just want to let it go. Don't hold down Shift. I'm going to pull it up to almost as high resolution as we can, just to see what we're working with here. So I'm going to click Enter, and that's going to rasterize the image, not in the way that Photoshop thinks about it, but in the way that the rendering's working. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the layer. Now I did change my shortcuts, so I'll show you how to do that really quick, but I just hit Control Alt D, and then I'm going to go ahead and type in floral and name my layer. So if you come up here to File, actually it's Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then you want to come down to Layer. And I would recommend doing this because I don't know why they have the other one's set to default. So change this duplicate layer. Go ahead and just click on it and then type in Control Alt and hit D at the same time. And it's going to ask you if you want to override that. Go ahead and click yes. And then go ahead and click Apply or OK. And now you should be able to come in again. Select Layer 1. Go ahead and click Control Alt D. Rename your layer, and you should be good to go. Oh, another thing to note too is that I am using artboards on this project. I know sometimes we, sorry, I know sometimes we don't use those in Photoshop, but if you go back, I guess I'll show you that really quick and why I'm doing that. So if you click New, um, you want to come over here, and when you check this box, it says artboards. The reason being is because it's going to give you a pasteboard outside of um, your work area right here. So what I mean by that is like if I come in and um, I make an awesome circle and I want that circle to make it red. I think I want it here, but then I don't. I can drag it out here and I can leave it. And that sorry, that for me is huge, because now you're able to see that, and you can see it over here in the layers panel. Um, and in that layers panel, you have your ellipse in your different layers. Let me check this live stream really quick. Yeah, it's looking good. I'm gonna make me smaller so you guys can see better. Okay, so let's dive back into this. um, so yeah, so So artboards definitely important. Again, as long as you're saving it to the cloud, you're doing good. After each layer, if you're not saving it to the cloud, I recommend just hitting Control S. So just kind of get in the habit of doing that. That'll save your grief a lot, and you're only one layer behind as opposed to a whole project behind. So kind of just get into that. So that's kind of how you set up your deal. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename this layer to just backup. And this is just so you work non-destructively as much as you can. Now, I will say I'm a digital painter, and so I do work destructively, more so than I did like right when I started. In Photoshop, there's a lot of great tools. One thing that I find that I actually need to do quite often, and you'll see in this, is kind of merge the ideas of like digital painting and the ideas of working non-destructively, kind of like a designer or a photographer would. With that being said, though, don't draw lines around how you're using your tools. I think that that's really important. Because if we draw lines around how we're going to use the toolkit that we have, then we can't think creatively about different solutions. And so, like this tutorial, I might actually do stuff differently than I did how I made that poster before. I didn't necessarily write it down. I'm just coming in here and just showcasing like what I would do in this situation. So the situation is that, I have sorry, excuse me. The situation is I have this line art or this drawing. Obviously, black and white is going to be important for this. It's not going to necessarily work with color, but we're just doing this black and white line art drawing. We want to bring it in and we want to use this asset. This could work for a logo, anything like that. We want to use this asset that we've hand drawn and bring it in and blow it up because this drawing that you're looking at here is super small. So, I think it's maybe an inch and a half all the way around in terms of diameter. And so you can kind of tell based on like the scale of the pen here. I mean, this is like almost, two Sharpies wide. So this is not a huge deal. So obviously with it being on even just an 8.5 by 11, it's getting scaled up. And you can already see it's looking pretty good. So, um, so yeah, so that's the idea with this is don't get boxed in. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to hide this layer here. And we're going to come over here and we're going to get control backslash, and that's going to lock our layer. And so the backslash on your keyboard is the bottom one down there by the shift key. I don't know what it is when you're using Mac, but you'll hit control and backslash. That'll lock your layer, and we've hidden it. So we know we have the original asset if we need it. So we're going to come up here to this next layer. And again, you're going to kind of see how I work here, which is going to be using some digital painting best practices as opposed to photography best practices. And I would say, like, as a designer, don't be afraid to figure out what workflow works best for you. So I like working as a painter and less like a designer. I don't know. I still have PTSD from school, I feel like, even though I've been in the industry for like almost 10 years now. But I don't like going in and using things like the pen tool or selection tool when I can avoid it, because to me it's not very fun. And I always like drawing, so you'll kind of see me kind of come in here and do some drawing. So when we're using the eraser tool, you're going to click E on your keyboard. You're going to come up here and we're going to want to come to hard round. Make sure your opacity is set to 100. And the key with the eraser and the brush tools is that the hotkey is the brackets. So if you hit the bracket down, it's going to go smaller. If you hit the bracket up, it's going to go bigger. And so you can see right here, if we're on this layer and we have it selected, we're just going to click and it's gone. Click, 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 click. And you're going to watch this thing take shape here really quick. And again, I recognize that we're working non-destructive, or we're kind of working destructively here in Photoshop. Again, this is just kind of my workflow. So if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. There's other ways to do this. You could come in and you can make a selection. You could try and go around with the pen tool and then let it do what it needs to do. But we can kind of show you a different way of working, and maybe it'll help you kind of think through what you've got going on. So we're going to come in and just kind of erase as much as we can. Hit Control Z if you go a little too far. And just kind of have fun with it, Like it's a Saturday. No reason to really do it. Sometimes it's kind of therapeutic to come in here and see this all work. So, so yeah. And then you can kind of come in if you want to see kind of what you're doing. I would say, use a solid layer and then you can come back up into this layer and click E again. Just kind of erase out what we got going on. You can kind of watch it take shape and form here. And don't be afraid to kind of come in. You can see I'm making mistakes, and I'm not perfect at it either. So, but sometimes, at least I've found that when you use selection tool, you end up just, it's so techy, and especially when your brain is kind of in art mode. Like, don't get me wrong, like I code and stuff like that, and so like sometimes I am in tech mode, but for me, it just when I'm doing organic art and something where I'm like drawing, I want it to feel that way like all the way through the process because my brain just it functions better like that that way, and it just kind of takes the anxiety off, and it's less of a chore. It's kind of fun. It kind of brings back like your childhood days of just coloring and all that stuff, and I always got in trouble for coloring outside the lines. I wish I would have known you could have just like masked it out and erased it, but of course, no art teacher teaches you that, right? Um, so yeah, so we're getting it pretty close. Almost like a sticker is kind of like my approach to this. You don't need it super close because we are going to do some selection stuff later on. But if you kind of get it to like a sticker, kind of fun to do. It only takes a few minutes, so it's not like it's going to kill your time or your workflow or anything, but be a pretty cool little sticker. um, but yeah, and then just so you guys know too, I'm gonna be reposting this on YouTube. Um, so if you want to follow me over there, it's gonna be my first video over there. So you can follow it from the ground up. Woo! But I'm gonna try and get some more stuff out there. And I know I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about how we need to get out there more because there's just some really bad tutorials, and we wanted to kind of help get stuff there. All right, so that's kind of it's pretty good. I know it's kind of a little messy, but now we're gonna come in here and we're gonna kind of take a look at what we've got going on. So I'm gonna try and really work this outside edge right here, but we should be good to go, and we'll kind of work that in the selection here in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and hide this layer and kind of take a look at what we got going on. So you can see this looks awesome. And one of the things that you'll notice is up here there was some artifacts. And you can kind of see it like right here. And so these grayscale things are going to be really hard to select out. So I'm going to get rid of them right here. And you can kind of see those pixels, right? They're kind of like an off-white. And I just know from experience that when I come in to do a color selection, that these are just going to be a pain. So I'm even going to get rid of them down here. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change my brush size to soft round. And then I'm going to kind of bring it down a little bit in size. I'm going to drop I'm going to keep my opacity where it's at. So let's just kind of work this out a little bit. And we'll get this to where it's looking nice and clean. And again, this is kind of like a digital painting workflow. Where you're doing a lot of blending, erasing, kind of working around pixel by pixel. Oop. Everybody makes mistakes, right? Everyone has those days. Um, so yeah, and you can kind of see how much easier this is going to be for Photoshop to use its selection tool and find just that black and that really dark. And it's not going to bring any of these extra artifacts around the edges like this. And so I'm just cleaning up where I think it needs it. Like right here on the edge, you can kind of just see that faint little outline, almost like a little blur going around the edge. So we're just going to come in, just kind of detail this out. And like one thing I would say when working with Photoshop, and I know I was kind of hesitant to do this initially too, is don't be afraid to look at these pixels as if it's almost like some paint, right? And it's like the whole idea with painting is edge control. And so as you're kind of coming in, just know that these pixels are your paint. So you can smudge them, you can move them around, and that's one of the great things of working in Photoshop other than Illustrator. And don't get me wrong, I use Illustrator every single day. And I love that program. And I love working as a vector, and I know that um, in general, vectors get a lot of praise I would say that bitmaps have their place. They really do, and Photoshop really does a great job at getting these incredible images. And what's nice too is like you can come in and like say you wanted to add a little bit here. So I have my soft round brush. I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna click here, make sure that my foreground color is set to black, and I'm just gonna kind of paint in what I've got. And then I'm gonna come in to erase this a little. So I'm gonna take this down. I'm just gonna kind of erase it back. And you can see like, sorry, excuse me, how much more organic that is than having to like go into like a pen tool and remake that. So like it's just a great way of doing that. One of the things you can do too is like um, if you have like a drawing tablet or something, you can actually just come in and if you click I on your keyboard and you come up here to like this gray, it looks pretty good. I'm gonna click B again. It's gonna set as my foreground, and then I'm just gonna kind of make this connect, which again you couldn't do in Illustrator. It wouldn't work because you've got a lot more. I'm gonna drop my opacity on this down a little bit. Because when you're working in Illustrator, again, this is an art piece, right? It's not like a super clean. I want that organic drawn feel that you can't get in Illustrator. It doesn't look right. It looks off. Because you have people that use like image trace, or you have people that come in and like trace all the paths with a pen tool, which is just exhausting in my opinion. Um, I like the organic feel of this, and you can tweak different things here. Like I don't like how this edge is like that, and so I'm gonna kind of bring this in a little bit, make it less sharp. And this is stuff that you would miss. Like you would have never got to this stage of your creative workflow if you're just using like a Photoshop built-in selection. You're just going from point A to point B to point C to point D, point E, F, G, all the way down the line. And so that's why I'm a huge proponent of, again, using your toolkit, thinking outside the box, and finding a workflow that works for you. And obviously, I'm no stranger to the game either. Like sometimes you need to work faster, and in those situations, yeah, I mean, use the tool the way you need to. Just like if you're doing any other kind of job or occupation. Sometimes you've got to just kind of dig in and go. And you don't have the luxury to sit here and do what I'm doing here. But, it's a Saturday morning. We have some time. Um, so yeah, I think this is a pretty good place to start. So let's start working on some adjustment layers. So we're gonna we're gonna go ahead and click Control S. Go ahead and save out your file, and then we're gonna come in. We're gonna duplicate this layer again, and so we're gonna go name it whatever you want. I'm just gonna name it 002. So I know this is my second stage. I'm gonna hide the other one. I'm gonna click on it. I'm gonna click Control backslash again to lock it, and so now everything's locked and we're good to go. So I'm gonna come up here, and I'm actually gonna run a selection. So I'm going to go color range, and then I'm going to come up here to sampled colors. I'm going to click shadows. I'm going to drag, sorry, excuse me. I'm going to drag this up and kind of see what we got going on. So first thing I'm noticing is I got to cancel out, and I've got to hide this ellipse layer. So let's hide this ellipse layer. Now we're going to come back up to select, and we're going to come over to color range. Again, we're going to go up to shadows. I'm going to kind of bring this over here so I can kind of see, just to kind of make sure I'm getting what I need. Range wise, I'm going to bring this up, bring it up, bring it up, bring it up, bring it up, right about there. And you can kind of see how you see this preview right here. I'm going to increase my fuzziness quite a bit, actually. It's not in this situation. It's not going to hurt anything. Obviously, if you're doing hair or something like that, don't go too far with this. But we're doing an art piece where we really want to capture this ink. We want to capture the data that's in here as best we can. We've erased a lot of the artifacts, and so now we're really trying to just find what we want. And so I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to try and just play with the slider a little bit. No, I like it right there. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. All right. And so now we're going to invert this. I'm going to remember what I've got here. So, and, if you need to, take a screenshot of this deal. I know you can load and save the things. I don't know. I never really do that. But I usually just remember 51 and 250. And so I'm going to click invert, and it's going to invert it. And that looks pretty good, just from like this little thumbnail image. And so I'm going to click OK. And all those pixels are selected. I'm going to click delete. And, I don't know if anything happened. And that's probably because we need to come in here and convert to smart object. So convert it to a smart object. Then we're going to right click and we're going to come into rasterize. And now we're going to click delete. Boom. And that's what we want right there. So I'm going to go Control D and kind of see how it looks. Awesome. And now I'm going to bring in an off color here. So click on this layer, click on the little swatch. And remember, take a breath. Everything's undestructive, so we're okay, even if everything went wrong. I'm going to change it to this really pretty green up here. I really like this idea of this like cool mint green. Change it a little cooler, almost like a sea foam, right? All right, and I'm going to unhide it and kind of see where we're at. And that looks pretty good. Um, I mean, obviously, we're not going to be putting this on a dark background. If we were putting it on a dark background, we wouldn't have that fuzziness. That fuzziness layer, though, is going to help as we start doing some adjustment layers and keeping this data of these strokes, which I really love, that were made by like a really thin micron, staying in. So, personally, I like that, and you'll kind of see how we'll fine tune those edges with adjustment layers here soon. But you can see now, I mean, everything's pretty good. I mean, it doesn't really look like a sticker, um, and I think that looks pretty nice. So, so let's go ahead and unhide, or let's go ahead and hide that again. And sweet. So we've kind of, already got that. And, if you're doing like an ink drawing, if you hit Control T on this layer, you're pretty much done. Like you don't really need to do much more than this if you really don't want to. Um, this is your art. What I would do is I would come in and just scale this down by 50%, and boom. I mean, look at how crispy that looks. That is awesome. You just kind of let this sit in the middle of a page, print this out in an 8x10 for your mom or whatever, and throw it in a nice little frame from wherever you're grabbing it. I usually grab something from like the thrift store, give it a little shot of spray paint, and boom, you have like an awesome fine art piece that is now scalable. Now you can print this off for anyone you want. You can throw it up on Society 6. You can do whatever you need to do. And, it's just a beautiful little thing to do. And, it's pretty quick. So if we want to take this to the next level, though, here are some tips and tricks. If you have a few more minutes to stick around with me here, on what I do to kind of go above and beyond. Because I feel like I'll save you kind of the huge lecture here, but kind of like an insight into what I'm thinking is if you want to stand out, usually what happens is people just like do a project. And you'll see like a lot of people on YouTube that just like do a project. And I don't know if it's just because there's a huge negative way of looking at school, and like maybe it's just like an academic thing. But in academics, when you're learning design, there's a lot of emphasis made on the process, almost to the point where it's too much, where you're overcorrecting, and so you have to like as an individual you have to kind of pull back the reins and go straight down the road as opposed to veer off to the right. And what happens is professors are always about, hey, you have to have a process. You have to have a pre-production process, a production process, and then a post-production process. And so you have three parts and three stages. And I'll kind of I'll draw this out a little bit because I think this is important and this might help you. So so you have a pre-production process, and this pre-production process is where you do do a lot of your brainstorming and ideation. You do thumbnail sketches. You work through an idea, and that's stuff that you didn't see me do on this live stream, but I did it. Where and this is years in the making, right? Like I say, like, okay, cool, like, yeah, let's just digitize this awesome flower drawing that I did. If you would have told me 3 years ago to draw this, there's no way I could have done that. I had to really go in, and I'm still not great at it, but I'm getting there. And I love painting and inking and all that stuff. But what I had to do is I had to learn how to do this. And so I found my inspiration. I found my style. I found what I liked. I found what I didn't like, and I emulated and grew that idea. And I think, like, one thing that's really cool is, like, when I was first starting out, and I was with my photography instructor and mentor, and his name was Robert Langham, and this was down in Texas, actually. We were in class. It was the first class, and he drew a light bulb on uh, the whiteboard, I guess, back then. And he said, "This is an idea," and we just started talking about ideas and, like, how they take you forward. And his point as a photographer, and he had been doing it quite a while, and he had started. And I loved his class because we worked in the actual dark room. We learned how exposure works. We had this real solid hands-on understanding of not just digital photography, but photography as a whole. And we went all the way back to, like, ancient Greece, and how they had, like, a whole room that had a lens that would, capture exposure and put it on the wall. And we just talked about how these ideas have grown over time. And that's exactly what happens in pre-production. This is where your creativity is really shining. So, like, when you're on Pinterest, or you're scrolling through Behance or Dribble or whatever it is, don't be afraid to pull out and appreciate different things, and keep them in your mind. Because as you do so, and this is, like, one of the huge strengths that creative people have, it's a huge weakness, but it's a huge strength, is being able to think about a wide variety of things all at once. And it drives me nuts because sometimes I can't sleep, or something happens, or I'm in the middle of a conversation, or I'm in the middle of an essay, and I jump all the way around. And I think, like, initially this would be called, like, what would you call it, like ADHD or something like that. Thank goodness I didn't have any crazy parents that put me on Ritalin or anything. But I digress on that point. But as you kind of hold all of these ideas in your mind in this pre-production process, you'll watch it come together. And if you're a visual thinker and you're creative, which most likely you are if you're watching this, you can watch your process expand. And then once you have that, a pretty good idea, I'd say, like, 85% there, now we're talking production, right? And that's what you're watching me do. And this is the problem, is that when we're looking at the world, and we're watching tutorials, or watching live streams, or whatever, or we're taking on client work, or we're getting assigned to do some project, this production here is all that we see. It's all that anyone really cares about. Unless you have, like, an awesome art director or something like that. But for the most part, all people are worried about is production, productivity. How long did it take you? How quick did you do it? One sec. Sorry, 'tis the season for allergies. But anyways, so this is really the crux of everything. And don't get me wrong, this is really important. Like, productivity and production and efficiencies and toolkits and all that stuff, knowledge base, expertise, experience, all of that is vital. And it's really important, but it's not more important than this pre-production here. It's just as important, but it's not as important to people who don't understand how the process works. And for example, let's just backtrack just a little bit, and I'll show you why. So again, my production process with this included just prepping the file, like you saw, which could have been in pre-production if you want to take it on more of a micro scale. but those little artifacts. And we would not have the selection we have now if we didn't erase those. It would have been a pain. You'd have had to come into like this deal. It would have selected like a big chunk of stuff here, and you would have seen it when we had this mint layer on, where like right here there would have been so many artifacts and like gray values that are just like impossible to get out. And you'd have to go in and erase them by hand then. Whereas when we did it preemptively, then we caught, remember these little edges over here. And that's something that you wouldn't have seen. And that same pattern exists in pre-production, where you catch stuff, you're in a different spot than you would have been had you just jumped right into production. And I know sometimes we have to jump right into production. I get it. Sometimes we just have to get the job done and we're getting paid and you got to make a living, right? Totally get it. In those situations, disregard it. Know when to turn it on, know when to turn it off. And that's going to be really important. And then the last piece that is oftentimes forgot is post production. This is huge because what happens, and you'll see this on YouTube for sure. This to me, this one thing is how I can tell if someone is actually experienced or not. I can tell whether or not they are experienced as a designer, an illustrator, whatever you want to do. How is their post production? Are they just getting the production done, exporting a ping, and then sending it? Or are they coming back in and actually spending time, energy, and expertise, all that stuff, on post production? So I'll give you an example. If you are working on a logo and that logo gets completed, and maybe you had a good pre-production. You did your thumbnail sketches, you gave the client 3 or 4 different roughs, they picked a couple, and you kind of merged those ideas together to create what you have now. And you create that and you send it to them as an EPS, as a PNG, you export it as black, white, colored, all of that, it's delivered. But you went through that process very rushed because you were tired. You were kind of maxed out. You're tired of looking at this logo on the screen. You've been looking at it for 3 weeks. The client went back and forth with you. It's really frustrating because you're like, oh my gosh, you even chose the one or she chose the one I didn't even like. And I put all this time and creative energy into this pre-production of finding this really cool iteration I know would work for her brand, but she didn't really like it, and I can't really make her do it. It's her business, right? And so you're tired and you just put it in an artboard 1,000 by 1,000, center it vertically, center it horizontally, put it on. But you forget to add clear space, and you don't take the time to do that. You don't have a grid. You also don't save things out as a backup. In addition to that, you don't push a little bit further to make sure that your kerning's right in between your letters. Your tracking is just exactly where you want it. You don't come back to it after a break and look at it with fresh eyes. You don't zoom all the way out to see if it works when it's really small. You omit all of that post-production because you're ready to just get it to the client and be done. That to me, these two things, so post-production and pre-production, are what separate good design, or I'd even say okay design, and great design. And and don't get me wrong, sometimes okay is good enough. Sometimes you just need production. I get it. Just be done, right? Especially if you're just getting paid nickel and dime. This is just a credibility piece for you. Excuse me. I totally get it. But, if you're trying to make stuff that's portfolio worthy, pre-production, post-production. All right, enough said. So we're going to go ahead and hide those. All right, so we're going to come back in. We're good to go with this. Best practices with stuff. Let's go ahead and work on that next week. So I'm going to kind of leave this file. I'll go ahead and share it out on Instagram and YouTube when I re-upload this on Monday probably. And you can use this. This is open source if you guys want to use it in a design or something like that. Obviously, remember, this is not a vector. It's a bitmap. So you're going to need to use it in Photoshop, keep it on a white background, and get creative with your design so that you can use it the way you need to. But if you want to use it, print it off. Non-commercial though, just to make sure we're not not do anything goofy. So that sounds good. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If there's anyone out there, truth be told, I don't really know. Um, but I'll get better at this. So thanks for working with me. Hopefully, some of this was helpful. Again, just to kind of backtrack what we did, we brought in just a screenshot of our inked image from Instagram. We went ahead and brought it in, duplicated our layers, renamed them, used the eraser tool to kind of erase it to where it looked like a sticker. And then we duplicated that layer, got rid of the artifacts, kind of fine tuned everything, and then ran a selection color range up here with shadows, with some fuzziness. And I believe if you remember, these were our settings if you want to save them. They're not bad. So it's like 51 and 250. Ugh, the resolution's atrocious. Um, but let's see if that. Oh, there we go. That's better. So if you ever need to do that again, you can kind of see what we did there for the color range. Once that's done, pretty much good to go. Everything looks pretty good. We just kind of did that trick with the layer behind to kind of see what's going on. And I'll kind of dive into how to get rid of this white anti-aliasing, kind of going around the edges next week. And we'll kind of dive into that and take that a step further. And my goal next week is to kind of showcase how to make this poster with you guys. There's just a lot you can do with this. And so we'll work through a bunch of adjustment layers on how to get it to look just right and to have this awesome, high definition feel. Almost like literally like someone just like came in and like hand drew this on your painting or on your poster, which is just so cool. And then we'll kind of work through, the design process, my pre-production, my post-production, just to kind of showcase how to make a poster. How to make a poster. So yeah, so my name is Nate. It's awesome to meet you if you're out there. And yeah, stay tuned for more awesome tutorials and how-tos and just process stuff. I love to dig into this with a little bit further, and hopefully we can have some cool guest stars too. That can kind of come in and showcase their process. Keep hustling out there. It's hard. I know it is. Stay healthy, work hard, and watch all the stars fall into place. And it'll be cool to do. So don't get discouraged. Everything's cool. Have some fun with it this week. Don't forget to have fun. Life's short. So have some fun. Do what you love. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye.